Hello, everybody. All of the presumably Autechre fans that I imagine are watching this video. Um, uh, I've got here a Autechre Knockout Bracket. It's a little program that I whipped up one day recently. It takes 32 tracks from their EP and album collection at random, giving you the ability basically to do a bit of a fun knockout to see which your favorite track is. I find this fun to do for myself, so I thought maybe I'll record one, see if anyone else is interested, and maybe put it on in the background if you're doing something. Have a listen, see if you agree or disagree with anything I say here. I'm sure there's bound to be plenty of disagreement. For a group that has such a solid discography, it's gonna happen. You can get a link to the download of this program in the description of the video. It's just a few files. You'll notice that there's these little black boxes beside each track. They are toggles that play a little snippet of the song, in case you need to jog your memory, but I won't be playing those in this video because I don't want to get taken down by any sort of YouTube copyright. That would be quite frustrating. So I'm going to leave that on these videos. But if you do download the program, all of the audio snippets will be in there. You can just delete the AE snippets folder in the resources folder if you want to get rid of them, though. So let's get started on this. I'll do it one section at a time, so a quarter at a time, and then we'll whittle it down. I haven't properly looked at this seed yet, this bracket, so I'm curious to see what's going to happen. But let me know in the comments what you think of some of the decisions, whether you agree or disagree, if you've got any suggestions, and let's get started. So I'll move over to the first section here. And right, there we go. And it seems like the first one we've got up is interesting. Sea-Patch versus Marhide. And so that's Sea-Patch from their 1995 album Try Repeat. Classic album. I don't think any Autechre fan's going to disagree there, really. Versus the track Marhide from technically their latest album Plus, which I believe was 2020. So two very different things going on here. Sea-Patch, one of the classic tracks, really, from one of the classic albums. Upbeat groove, not really a slow burn. I think it's only around 4 minutes. It's very punchy, very catchy. Gets segued into perfectly from the previous track, Yuto. I really like the sounds on that one. Like I said, very punchy. Marhide, I guess there are some similarities between these two. Marhide is also quite a short track, only about 3 minutes, and it's also got a bit of a punchy groove to it. But Marhide, I guess, is a bit sillier. And if you know what I'm talking about, if you know the track, you'll probably know what I mean there. It's quite a silly sounding track for them, with some what sounds like 808 cowbells going on in there, which is a bit strange when I first heard it. Just a repetitive groove with kind of a noise element that creeps in and out of the track. I do love both of these. I think they're really good, but for me, the solid pick here has got to be Sea-Patch. It's just, great melodies. Got a really good hook to it. One of those tracks that I'd say is a good introduction to the group if you want to show someone what they're about. Next, we've got Matel and Perlent's Lucid 2. Matel from the debut, Incunabula. Perlent's Lucid 2 from their quad range EP, Quaristis quad range, which I am a bit of a fan of. I do really like that EP. I think it's quite overlooked, underrated. A lot of really great kind of jammy almost type tracks. They sound borderline like generative, like some of the stuff they end up doing later on in their career. longer, drawn out cuts, less edited down. Matel, yeah, it's catchy. It's a catchy track. I wouldn't say it's one of the standouts on Incunabula. Yeah, that little melody that plays throughout it's kind of cool, and there's some good delay effects and some interesting kind of panning, some very wide, with it's big stereo width on some of the synths and sounds used there. Perlin's Lucid is very spacious. It's incredibly ambient without it being a straight up ambient track. You've got those kind of soft, noisy pads with an incredibly low key drum beat in the background. Yeah, really unique. I think out of these two, I am going to go Perlin's Lucid just because I don't think there's much like it in their discography. Even on the EP it's from, it's got this weird middle ground between full-on ambience and these subtle beat-driven tracks that I think is kind of in its own niche. Yeah, so next we've got Zeiss Contorex. Right, I'm probably going to butcher a lot of these names, by the way. That'll be half the fun of this video, I'm sure. We've got Zeiss Contorex versus Netlon Sentinel. So, interestingly enough, we've got a head-to-head from two tracks from EP7. They might be actually next to each other in the track lists. I can't remember, but that would be a strange coincidence. Zeiss Contorex, very, very like hip-hop influenced, really cool beat to it. Got a kind of swagger to it. Some strange vocal manipulation throughout the track that I think is cool as well. Netlon Sentinel. Yeah, very cool, very cool. The way it kind of breaks down at the end and this melody slowly creeps in. It's quite a memorable melody. It's the first track I heard from EP7, and it's the one that definitely made me want to deep dive into the rest of the album, or EP, whatever you want to call it. I do think out of the two, I believe that Zeiss Contorex is the more solid pick. I'm going to go for that one. Just because the progression of, I don't know, the beat is just catchier, it sticks in your head, and I like the way the track slowly progresses. Netlon Sentinel definitely does progress too, but I don't think it's quite as satisfying. Next one. Oh, this is an interesting one. The Battle of the Openers. We got Acro Year 2 from LP5 and Xylan Room from Giraffe 7.3. Both really strong tracks. This is difficult. Yeah, you can really tell I haven't looked at these beforehand because I'm looking at this now and not really sure what I'm going to do. Acro Year 2, of course, that really fast tempo, hard-hitting fast drums, with some kind of twangy melodies, this very string-like almost sounding twang to the synths on that track. Really interesting. It's quite bright but also punchy at the same time. And Xylan Room, I mean, it really opens up that whole sound palette for Draft 7.3 immediately. You get introduced to it right off the bat. The whole wood knocking, I like to think of it, kind of sound palette that's going on. And then obviously the first half is quite beat driven, and then it sort of devolves in the second half and sounds like it's falling apart, but it's still repeating and revolving. It's really, really clever. But I do have to pick, and I think I'm going to go with Acro Year 2, purely because I just think it does what it sets out to do a little bit better. It's very catchy, great melodies, and it's just a ride. It keeps you interested the whole like 7 or 8 minutes it goes. It's really, really good stuff. Right, tell you what, I'm going to keep doing this one until we get to the I guess one of the final four here. So C-Patch versus Lucid 2. Very difficult. I mean, they're so different, such different sound palettes. I am going to go C-Patch just because I think it's a bit more iconic. The melody really sticks in your head, and the beat is just, yeah, they got it just right with the production on that track. Zeiss Contorex and Acro Year 2, I am going to go with Acro Year. Honestly, could have flipped a coin on that one. I think they're both amazing tracks. So it seems like the 90s output is winning in this first bracket. And then out of C-Patch versus Acro Year 2, I am going to go C-Patch again. It's one of the best on Tri-Rep, in my opinion. So we've got our first semi-finalist. Let's go to the next group. Let's see what we've got here. Make sure everything's in frame. Yeah, it is. Lovely. Right. So we've got BQ, BQ, BQ from NTS Session 1. And that's versus... Right, this is all going to be different pronunciations. I say it LEC9 7H Res. Also from NTS. Oh, I'm going to test myself now. I want to say NTS 2. Yeah, I'm going to go with NTS 2. So first track, BQ, 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 seems to be a bit of a controversial one from what I've seen from the discussion around the album. And it's definitely unique. It's a very, very repetitive track, even for Autechre. This kind of plodding, bouncy synth that it almost sounds a bit jaunty. Once you get into the swing of the track, I think it's one of those ones that it's really easy to either lose the beat or not notice the beat when you're first listening to it. But it does have a bit of a jaunty swing to it, which I think is quite cool. And the brightness of the synths really fits with that kind of swing. And then you've got those cute pads that kind of creep into the background as it progresses. I think it's a really nice track. Though 13 minutes is quite long for what it does. But I think if you're in that headspace, it's the perfect length for it. So it really comes down to where you're at the time, I guess. LEC9, completely different, always evolving, this track, feels like. Real, like, pounding bass and thudding kicks. And this kind of sparse, entangled interplay of all these different synths that are just cracking and popping and dashing across your ears. It's a real cluster of sound, a real kind of multi-layered sound palette on this one. I particularly like towards the end of the track when the kick just starts like pounding so much harder than it is at the beginning and stretching itself out, and you get these huge bass swells underneath. So probably from my descriptions, I think it's clearer that my favourite is LEC9, but I do like BQ quite a lot as well. Nil versus Eggshell. Okay, very different time periods again, so we're back to the 90s. Nil off of Amber, Eggshell off Incunabula. Both really good tracks. This is very difficult, actually. They are both, I would say, one of the strongest, if not the strongest, off of their respective LPs. Both have such strong melodies. And both, actually, really good examples, as I've said earlier, with C-Patch, of tracks you could probably show people who are not introduced yet to Autechre and want to know something about their sound without getting too overwhelmed by the later stuff. I believe my brother, actually, these are two of the tracks that he first liked from the group when I was first showing them their music. But Nil, great melody to it. I really like the way the song builds and the layers just keep creeping in. And Eggshell does a very similar thing, to be honest. It kind of just goes down to which one do you like the melodies of more, which ones do you like the sound palette of more. I have to pick. It could have been either one, but I'm going to go with Nil. I just think it's a bit more satisfying, and I love the way the kind of bass undercuts the melody halfway through, the way it reveals itself. I think it's a really cool addition. Moving on, Output from EP7 versus Ray from LP5. This is a no-brainer to me. I'm sure it is to a lot of you as well. So I'm just going to do that right now. Ray, for me, is the better track. Output is a very cool song, but I do think it's one of the weaker ones on EP7. although I may have to revisit it sometime soon. It's got a cool groove, some cool kind of melodies and chords in the background, but it is very repetitive, and I do think it could maybe be a couple minutes shorter, but yeah, it's still a great track. But Ray, yeah, I'm sure many of you know or love Ray already. The melodies are fantastic. The synths sound so good, and that slowdown that happens halfway through is just one of the best moments in their discography, in my opinion. One of those tracks that you can show someone who claims that Autechre don't have emotion in their music. I don't really know how you could listen to a song like this and not hear the emotion in it. But yeah, really great song, really great track. And I know I keep calling them songs, and they technically don't have lyrics, but oh well. Right, 9010171121. What a mouthful. Versus II Pre-Esque or Escape, I don't know. So first one from Quad Range and the second one from Plus. Neither of these are particular standouts to me, particularly 901, because it's part of a suite of tracks, of 901 tracks. Sometimes I do forget which is which. Actually, I might be forgetting now. But yeah, already I was going to pick Pre-Esque here. I think it's actually one of the better purely melodic tracks on the album, and I think it could have fit potentially on Sign, but its placement on Plus does make it seem a bit like a afterthought. But still, the melodies are cool. The bassy synth in particular, I think, is really, really nice sounding, really pleasant on this one. But yeah, 901 is a good track, but yeah, there's not enough about it to really keep me hooked. I'm just glad it doesn't go on for like 14 minutes like a couple of the other 901 tracks do on that EP. So moving through these then, we've got LEC9 7H Rares versus Nil, two very different types of track. I am going to go with Nil, just because I think it's one of their best from the 90s. And then Ray versus Pre-Esque, I mean, it's got to be Ray. So then, quarterfinal, Nil versus Ray. This is quite difficult, actually. This is really hard. I think these are both amazing, amazing tracks. It could be a coin flip, to be honest. On any given day, I could pick one of these over the other. But as it is, I'm going to go with Ray. And we will continue on to the next quarter. I hope you're all enjoying watching this. And yeah, give me any suggestions if you'd like to see something else in future. Right, let's continue on. So, our next one, we've got... interesting. We've got Osler for N from the L Events EP against 444, the closer on Incunabula. Osler for N, particularly strange track, I think, in their discography. A bit of a standout. One of those tracks that I've seen quite a bit of discourse online of people finding it to be almost unlistenable. The rhythm is definitely there, but it's very off-kilter, and it does change throughout the track. It's one that definitely took me a few listens to kind of get into, but I think it's really cool, and I think it's always interesting when a group like Autechre can still make tracks that sound so out there and so wild. And then 444, I mean, it's the closer on Incunabula. It's one of the best on the album, if not the best on the album. The melodies are incredible. Everything just sounds so crisp and clean. Great balance between the ambient pads and synths and the rattle and high end of the drum track. It's just a joy for my ears. So I am going to go with 444 out of the two, but I do respect Osler for N for what it is. Next we've got, I don't know how to pronounce this one. I've never said this one out loud. SCH Mefta 2 from Sign, and Q from Chiastic Slide or Chiastic Slide, whatever you want to say. This one personally is an obvious pick. I'm going to go with Tew. I do think SCH is one of the cooler or more interesting cuts from Sign. I mean, for one, it's one of the tracks with a pretty solid rhythm and solid drum basis to it. A lot of the tracks on that album are purely ambient. And I do like how it grows. It's got a very kind of relaxed feel to it. The rhythm is very kind of not off kilter, but it's not rigid. I like the way it kind of stutters over itself. It's very, very cool. But Tew, I mean, Chiastic Slide, I'm just going to spoil it now. One of my favourite albums from Autechre, probably a top 5, which, you know, they have about 14 albums, so that is saying something. Just got such a creepy, like, menacing vibe. But it's also kind of subtle, delicate at the same time. The rattling hi-hats are just so, like, tiny, and they really tickle your ear when you're listening. Really just great composition. One of those tracks that I do think gets slept on quite a bit. But so next one, X4 versus No4. Easy pick for me here, got to be X4. No4 is interesting, being a kind of counterpoint almost to No2 from Quaristis. This, of course, being the Quaristis version. It's just very sinister and uneasy, but I don't find it particularly appealing to listen to. It's not one that I go back to often, but I will listen to it as I'm going through that album. And X4, I mean, that is arguably the crown jewel of the Plus album. I might be a bit more partial to Ecol 4, but I think I'm in the minority for that. X4, just 14 minutes of straight up banger. Just amazing grooves, just goes so fast, so hard hitting, but it still has all of these really fascinating kind of melodic elements that come in. The degrading piano that appears towards the end is so interesting, of a choice for them creatively. Haven't really heard anything like that in their songs for a while. I mean, you haven't heard anything that's straight up a piano that I can think of since Low Ride from the first album. But yeah, some great switch ups. It keeps itself fresh. A lot of different sounds, a lot of different snares and kicks, and it's just a perfect example of the way that Autechre can create these monolithic, sprawling tracks that keep your interest for their entire duration, while also being so high tempo, and just fast and hard hitting. It's a great track. And then wow, this this is a tricky one. This one might get me some people not liking me. So we've got LEC6 on set, is how I pronounce it, and Pia from EP7. So LE6 is from Elseek or Elsec, I believe 2. And wow, these are incredibly different tracks on completely opposite ends of the spectrum here. We got Pia, which is about 3 minutes, a beautiful, almost like lullaby of a track that closes out EP7. Got a very fun beat to it, but the star of the show there really is the melody and the pads and the synths. They're just so gentle, and it's one of those, again, kind of emotional, or like typically emotional type of tracks that you could show someone who was a bit skeptical of it. Really pretty, really pretty. And LEC6, by contrast, is 27 minutes. I think it might be their longest track that is quite largely beat focused. Obviously they have like things like All End, which are very ambient, but LEC6 is 27 minutes, where at least the first half does have kicks and proper drums, although it is kind of rumbling throughout the track. But yeah, this I'm going to spoil it here. This is one of my favourite Autechre tracks ever. I think it's vastly underrated, but I can totally understand why it's one that people aren't able to crack or just don't want to crack, because it is very, you could argue, one note, but I think just the way all of these spluttery synths like you hear on LEC 9, the way they kind of just interplay with each other, and these tiny like micro melodies and micro rhythms that just come in for a few bars and then leave, and then the next one comes in for a few bars and leaves. It's like you go into about 20 or 30 different grooves in this one track, and I think if you're listening out for them, you'll find different favourite moments every single time you revisit it. I think it's honestly a masterwork of their long-form content, their long-form tracks. And to me, the 27 minutes just breezes by. And then, of course, that iconic ending with that square wavy type synth that just rings out into nothingness. Yeah, awesome. So for me, I am going to go LEC 6, but it almost feels sacrilegious to leave Pier there in the first round. But hey, you can be frustrated at it in the comments if you like. So let's clear these ones up. We got 444 versus 2. This is a very difficult pick. I am going to go 444 just because I think its melodies are stronger, and I think it just works better for me, even though 2 was an amazing track. I like the vibe of 444 a bit better. And X4 versus LEC 6. This is, again, very, very difficult. Potentially more difficult than its last pairing. I think... Yeah, this really could go either way on any given day. X4 is incredible. I'm going to go LEC 6 though, because yeah, I've had a lot of hours of joy listening to that track. And then out of the two, 444 and LEC 6, I'm picking LEC 6. So the final quarter, and then we've got our final 4 when all of this is said and done. Right, let's just scroll down a bit here. Right, lovely. So we've got Caliper Remote and Fleur. Almost an unfair pairing, really, because one of them is a fully fledged track and the other is an interlude. Caliper Remote from LP5. I actually think this is an awesome cut. It's only like a minute and a half, but the melody is really strong. It's kind of airy, but also kind of unsettling at the same time. And I like the kind of crunchy production that some of LP5 has, and it's really prominent in this track. And then Fleur, opener for XI, really hard hitting and fast paced. A cool kind of bassy melody of like 3 notes that just kind of repeats throughout the track, but all of this spluttering metallic percussion that happens around it at an incredibly fast pace. Really cool intro to the album. I probably going to be a bit controversial here, but I am actually going to go with Caliper Remote, just because I think I get a bigger smile on my face when I see that track comes on than Fleur, although Fleur is a great track, or FL, whatever it's called. I do think it's great, but I think there's a lot on XI that are stronger personally. And I don't know, I have a soft spot for Autechre's more simplistic style sometimes, and I wish they did throw more of these smaller form melodic or just kind of little vignette style tracks into their newer material. So yeah, giving it its day. Okay, next we've got Uviol and Left Blank. So Uviol from Confield, first track from Confield we've had on here, and Left Blank from EP7. There's a lot of EP7 on here today. Yeah, pretty different tracks, although they were made roughly around the same time, I imagine. Left Blank is one of my favourites from EP7. Just, yeah, really catchy rhythms, very punchy percussion. And I like the way the track evolves, but it is a very subtle evolution. And I guess the same could be said for UVL, but there's a quality about UVL that I find almost quite hard to describe. On all the tracks on Confield, it almost feels like an art piece. Like each track is its own installation in an art exhibition. And UVL just feels like this. I always get this kind of towering glass structure, although it's got this kind of squeaky wheel kind of sound that goes on throughout the track. This that ties in with the hi-hats. But I get this just very off-kilter, towering glass structure in my head that's swaying side to side, and every so often it's steadying itself in the center. Not before some weird kind of beastly synths come in and smash the whole thing to pieces. But yeah, really vivid imagery that I get from that track. So I am going to go with UVL, although Left Blank is a very good cut in its own right. Next one, now this is an unfair pairing. Melv from LP5 versus Yeastland, the opener from their Sickly Sweet EP. I'm just gonna save some time. It's Yeastland. Melv is a very funny little vignette, and I know I just talked about how I like their shorter form little ditties, and it is a very cute track. I do think it sometimes gets hated unnecessarily, but Yeastland is just a great track. Anyone who hasn't properly checked out the Sickly Sweet EP definitely should do so. Some of their best 90s work is in that EP, in my opinion. And then the last new pairing we've got for this tournament, or this madness bracket, we've got Plyphon from Quaristis versus PT2 PH8, or Part 2 Phase 8 from Oversteps. A bit of an interesting one here. I know PT2 has its fair share of supporters. For me, it's one of my least favourites off Oversteps. I do love Oversteps quite a bit. I've particularly come around to it in the past couple of years, but this track is still, to me, one of the weaker cuts. Plyphon, although I love that unofficial music video that was made for it with those kind of nails in the floor. If you know the one I mean, then you probably also think it's cool too. It's a very well made, kind of syncopated, or track that it kind of builds and is configured with the timing of the song. But yeah, as for the track itself, I'm not huge on it. Like, I do like it. It's Autechre, I love pretty much everything they make. So it is a great track, but for their standards and for my personal liking within Quaristis as an album, it's not one of the ones I look forward to as much. And it's particularly weird that the version on Quaristis Versions is basically the same track, just with a tiny bit of the rhythm continued for about 5 extra seconds at the end. Bit weird. But yeah, I'm not too keen on either of these compared to their competition, but I am going to go with Plyphon. And then just continue with what we've got here then. Caliper Remote versus UVL. I have to go with UVL. Sorry, Caliper. It's done well to get this far, to be honest, but UVL is just a lot more unique, and yeah, it does a lot more for me. And then Yeastland versus Plyphon. Gotta be Yeastland. Really cool track. Very sounds quite positive to me, quite upbeat and feel good in a way. And then UVL versus Yeastland. I am gonna go with UVL just because I think it's so standout in their discography in terms of the way it sounds. But I guess you could make that case for pretty much anything on Confield. So with that, we have our final 4. Let's see if I can get these all on the screen together. There we go. Yeah, we have our final 4, and they are C-Patch, Ray, LEC6, Onset, and UVL. So a bit of a variety there. I'm glad it hasn't all ended up being from a certain era or a certain album. It would be pretty unfortunate if you guys immediately presumed that I very obviously have a favourite album or a favourite era, because that would make these a bit less fun to watch. But anyway, let's get to this first semi-final. We've got C-Patch versus Ray. This is a very difficult pick for me. I've spent a lot of time over the years listening to Ray, and particularly going on evening walks when the sun had gone down, listening to that track. I think it fits that atmosphere perfectly. And C-Patch is just one of those tracks on Tri Reperto that I always look forward to. After already bopping my head pretty hard to Yuto every time, you get this one as a bit of an encore that feels just as rhythmically pleasing. So this is a hard pick, really. I think at one point in time this would have been a lot easier for me, but I've kind of grown to love both of them almost in equal measure. But I think for the sake of this competition, can you tell I'm deciding as I'm saying this sentence? I think I'm going to go Ray. Just because I think its identity in their discography is a bit stronger than C-Patch, if that makes any sense. Anyway, it doesn't have to. It's what I've decided. But and then the other semi-final, we've got LEC6 Onset, and that's against Uviol. Both really interesting tracks. This is tough. Yeah, I'm going to go LEC6 Onset. I have to stay true to my gut, and my gut is saying that that track just keeps me interested in greater intensity for longer. Obviously, it's 27 minutes, so it's unfair to compare length, but when I'm thinking about which track I want for proper, like, paying attention and hearing everything it has to offer, I think for me, LEC6 ticks that box better. And so we've got our final two of Ray versus LEC6 Onset, and yeah, I'm pretty happy with this pairing, to be honest. This could have been a lot more one-sided, or, you know, a certain era-sided, so I'm happy with this. Very difficult decision. Let me know if you've watched all the way through. Let me know in the comments which you pick out of these two. I'm sure there will be a lot of people saying Ray, and probably a lot of people saying LEC6, depending on what era of Autechre you're a fan of. I know there's quite a few people who prefer their 90s material, and a lot of people who prefer their newer, kind of extended max MSP material. Out of these two, so tough, but I'm making my decision. I'm going to go with LEC6 Onset. That might get some people's disapproval. I guess it wouldn't be entertaining if there weren't some controversial picks. I think Ray is one of their all-time greatest tracks, and honestly I think C-Patch is up there as well. But there's just something about the depth of this track, the unending shifts in its form and shifts in its structure, and the rhythms within rhythms and the melodies within melodies. It's almost similar to their live material in a way, where there's a certain rhythm that is built on and there are things that happen within it. But I think this track feels like a more rhythmically rewarding and melodically rewarding version of some of their live material. To me, it feels like it's more focused, and it gives you a lot of different sections to get hooked on within its 30 minutes. But yeah, so that's my pick. I've gone with LEC6 Onset as the winner of this bracket. I am going to make note of which tracks have won in the past and what albums they're from, because I'm curious for my own sake to see if I do have a certain bias towards certain albums. Would be quite interesting to see. But yeah, let me know if you liked the video. Let me know if you've got any opinions or anything you'd like to add or say about the video itself. If you'd like to see more, let me know. That would be nice, because I'd be happy to make more. And yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. Keep on listening to Autechre, and yeah, I'll see you soon. All right, bye.